Hello YouTube, my name is Tristan, this is L-Space Books. Welcome if you're returning, welcome if you're brand new. I am happy to have any and everyone who stops by my little corner of the internet. Today I am launching sort of a new series that I am going to hopefully keep up on, because I think that it's one that deserves to be highlighted. And that is the listening corner. And this is where I'm going to be talking about all of the audiobooks that I'm reading. A while back I posted a video of my sort of 2025 reading goals, and in that I separated my audiobook and my physical book reading from basically my audiobooks don't count for my 2025 reading goals. However, that does not mean that audiobooks don't count as reading. I think that they are a special experience, a special way of consuming a book, and deserve to be highlighted, in my opinion, kind of on their own. Now, the reason, of course, why I did the other thing where I don't have them rolled into my reading goals for 2025 is because I am looking at specific page counts. And for me, just because audiobooks, there are no pages, just not counting them. However, doesn't mean I'm not listening to audiobooks, and it doesn't mean that I'm not enjoying a lot of audiobooks. Now, I get all of my audiobooks through Libby. I read them exclusively through my library. I don't support any Amazon anything. So I am basically getting books kind of as I can, as the loans come through and the holds come through. So there will never be a, listening corner TBR, because I will not ever be able to predict precisely what is going to come in at any given time. So, it's already long enough. Let's talk about the books that I've been reading over the last couple weeks via audio. The first one is The Fury by Alex Michaelides, and this is narrated by Alex Jennings. This was a great book. It's very Agatha Christie in its conception. Agatha Christie is referenced constantly throughout the book, and it really brings the spirit of her writing to this mystery thriller that Michaelides has done a really good job of constructing. Alex Jennings is a great narrator of this book. I think that he did a great job of giving each of the characters a distinct voice, a distinct way of speaking, a cadence and everything, and highlighting the difference in personality that Alex Michaelides wrote them in. The only thing that kind of bothered me about Alex Jennings, the narrator, was that his American accent just was obviously not very good. So there's one character who is an American, and every time she'd speak, you'd just be like, I get it, thanks. But, if that's my only complaint about his narrating, I feel like that's pretty high praise. The overall story is super fun. I thought that the reveal at the end, the twist, and the narration style of the writing, not the audiobook narrator, but the narration style of the literary narrator was really interesting, and I liked pretty much everything about it. I thought it was a fun ride, and I absolutely devoured it. It's like a 12-hour audiobook, and I set it in. I usually listen to my audiobooks about 2 times speed, and I just plugged in my headphones, and I was playing Minecraft while I was listening, and I finished it in 2 days. So that really went by quickly for me, and I really, really liked it. So that was a fun one. The next book that I listened to was Killers of a Certain Age by Dina Rayborn, which was narrated by Jane Oppenheimer and Christina Delane. And they used the 2 narrators because there are it's somewhat of a dual timeline narrative. The primary action takes place in the present, which is narrated by one of those narrators. Unfortunately, I didn't write who narrates which part. But anyway, and then there's another part where they're sort of like looking at details from the past, from the cast of characters, and then that's narrated from a different narrator. And I like that they did separate them because it did give you a clear separation in the audiobook when it was a certain perspective or certain timeline versus the other. I think that in audiobooks, if it's just read by a single narrator, that can kind of get mucky because for a plethora of reasons, I think that there was a smart choice having two narrators. Now, this is a band of assassins. Think Golden Girls, because this band of assassins is retired. And they are going off on their retirement and come to find out that the organization that they were working for is trying to kill them. So they have to set out to try to figure out what the heck's going on. And what ensues is a plot that is worthy of James Bond, and it is fabulous. Now, if you're expecting Golden Girls, because I think this is like marketed as James Bond meets Golden Girls, that's where I got that from, don't expect too much of the like fun bickering and just like snark that Golden Girls is so well known for. That is pretty much not there in the book. However, the James Bond side of things is great. I also really liked this book. I did not have any trouble consuming it. There's never a moment where I did not want to pick this book up, and overall, really, really enjoying it. I really enjoyed it because I did finish it. And I thought that the narrators were great. The next book that I listened to was The Woman in Me by Britney Spears, which is not narrated by her, it is narrated by Michelle Williams. There is a short introduction that is read by Britney Spears, but she does not actually read the memoir itself. The reason that she gives in this introduction is just because she doesn't want to have to relive the events that this book details. Obviously, writing the book was difficult enough. Now, this book, I was curious about it. There was no hold on the library, and I was kind of in between books, and so I decided to pick it up. It is kind of like Hollywood gossip, and I can't say that I recommend it if you're not interested in what happened to Britney Spears over the whole conservatorship and her career and all of that, all of those issues that sprung up there. I was lightly curious because I remember the day that Britney Spears was committed to, at least the last time, committed to a rehab facility, and I remember the media state and everything surrounding that, and to hear and I like have very distinct memories of like what went down according to the official narrative, and so now to get Britney's side of things, that was very interesting, and to kind of correct what was said at the time. And so now I feel like I've corrected the narrative and am now like officially informed of what happened to the victim of all of this. I think that Britney Spears does a good job through her ghostwriter of not being too bitter. She is very matter-of-fact with the facts of what happened to her, while also giving enough information and just discussing the emotional toll and impact that all of that happened, like all of that had on her. But she's never vindictive, she's never mean or venomous or anything like that. She's never toxic. So I think that overall it's not a woe is me narrative. It is one that is just, this is what happened to me, and this is where it's left me. And for that reason, if you're interested in it, I can tell you that it is worth the read. However, I would not just recommend this to any old person. Any person in general. I did think that Michelle Williams did a good job of like capturing Britney Spears' cadence and mannerisms, like vocal mannerisms. You can kind of compare the introduction that is read by Britney Spears versus the rest of the memoir that is read by Michelle Williams, and I think that you can do a pretty good, it's pretty easy to compare the two. So overall, pretty good audiobook. The next one is Poor Things by Alistair Gray, which is read by Catherine Drysdale and Russ Bain. Now, I'm still in the middle of this one, and it's kind of dragging. It's not because of the narrator, so I'm only in the section where Russ Bain is the narrator. I realize that as we're listening to this, I realize that my upstairs neighbors are walking around, and they have very heavy footfalls, and it's a very creaky building, so you're probably going to hear them a lot. But anyway, so this is kind of in the same vein as Frankenstein, and it's really interesting. I am enjoying it so far. The writing is quite good, and I think that Russ Bain does a good job of evoking the old-timey nature of this writing, which it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be like a early 1900s, like maybe late 1800s time period. And yeah, he does a good job of placing us there. I think that his voice is a good one to kind of set us in that time period. As I said, I've not finished this one, so I can't give you my complete thoughts. It is one that I'm just like, I was interested in at first, and then my interest in it has kind of waned a little bit. And again, it's kind of just like wrong time, wrong book. It is one that I will return to if I don't finish it by the time my loan expires, but it is good. It is pretty interesting, so I'll give my complete thoughts when I'm finished with it. The next book that I read and finished was The Book of Three by Lloyd Alexander, and this is narrated by James Langton. Not Langston, which is what I had originally written, Langton. Now, if you're like me, and you were traumatized by the Disney movie The Black Cauldron when you were little, you would be curious to go back and read the books that movie was based on. And I'm glad I did, because it's pretty interesting. It's a pretty interesting children's fantasy. It has a lot of Lord of the Rings type tropes built into it, and it's also very heavily based on Welsh mythology, which there's an introduction read by Lloyd Alexander in this one, which is pretty interesting. And it's the first of 5 books in the Chronicles of Prydain, and I believe the next book is The Black Cauldron itself. And this one, I'm not going to compare it to the movie. I'm not going to do like, this is the difference between the book and the movie and blah blah blah. But anyway, the book overall, as far as a like young adult fantasy coming from the like 70s and 80s, it's pretty good. It's not the best thing I've ever read, but I did not hate it. The narrator was okay. I think that I think that this was a book that was read and not necessarily performed, if you get that distinction. It was good. Like, I think he did a good job of most of the characters. A couple of them were kind of, I just didn't love the way that he narrated them. I feel like if I were to read it in the physical format, I might have imagined the characters' voices a little bit differently, and that is one of the downsides of listening to an audiobook, is that you do have one person's interpretation of the characters imposed on your own. But for the most part, it was an enjoyable experience, and I'm probably going to continue with the series just because I'm very curious to see how things go. All right. Now, the last one that I am in the middle of and loving is The Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak. And I got into the hype, guys. I am here. I'm loving it. And Let me also tell you who it's narrated by, because it's very important. It's narrated by Amira Gazella and Daphne Kuma, who are phenomenal narrators. They have beautiful voices that are lovely to listen to, and also do such a good job with all of the different accents that would be in this book, because you have the like Turkish Cypriot, the Greek Cypriot, you have the British people, as well as there's just like a plethora of different cultures that are being represented in this book, and the narrators are doing a really, really good job of presenting those and presenting the accents that those people would be speaking in. And so for that reason, they are phenomenal. Now, unfortunately, I don't remember, or I don't know who is playing which part, because one of these narrators, it's either Amira Gazella or Daphne Kuma, who is the fig tree in this book, is just incredible. I think that she has such a wonderful tenderness and sort of sly sense of humor. The way that she really brings the fig tree to life in such a special way, and I can't help but think that this is exactly what Shafak would have wanted the fig tree to sound like. And it's also very close to how I probably would have imagined the fig tree speaking if I were to read the book in the physical format. It's just phenomenal. And it's such a fascinating story. It's one that I didn't necessarily feel like I was excited to read, but it's one that just keeps getting talked about. Shafak is like a really popular author, and one who's like widely talked about. And I feel kind of bad that I've not been super, I guess, motivated to pick this one up, because it's very in line with the kind of book that I like. And it is precisely the kind of magical realism-ish type of story that I'm really into. And I love the fig tree. The fig tree is the star of the show, by far. And so is Costa. Costa is lovely. He is a fantastic person in general, and I love exploring his story and his grief, and also learning the history of Cyprus through the fig tree, and learning the history of fig trees and more botany things that I did not know. So it is a phenomenal book, and I highly recommend the audiobook, because I think it is fantastic. This series will probably take a little bit more shape as I go, but if I were to give you a recommendation of these specific audiobooks solely on the quality of the audiobooks, I would say The Island of Missing Trees is definitely at the top, and then that's going to be followed by The Fury by Alex Michaelides. So if you want some top-notch audiobooks, those two, definitely do them in audio form, because I think that they are fantastic. The other thing I forgot to mention about The Fury is that it's written very much in the style of somebody sitting next to you at a bar telling you a story. And I think for that reason, it really lends itself to being an audiobook, because it's very conversational. It is something that you feel like you are being recounted by a person. So I think that the experience was actually heightened by the fact that I read it as an audiobook. So if you can read either of those as audiobooks, definitely do that. The other ones, I would say you could either do physical or audio, and I don't think your experience is going to be that different. But with The Island of Missing Trees and The Fury, definitely audiobook is a really, really solid way to go. So that's what I have for you today. I will, as I listen to a few more audiobooks, this is not going to be a weekly thing by any means, but as I rack up a few more audiobooks, having finished them, I will film another episode of The Listening Corner. Thank you very much for watching. If you've read any of these, let me know what they are like in the comments. If you've read them in physical versions, definitely let me know about that as well. But if you've listened to them and have liked them as an audiobook, let me know what your listening experience was like. I will see you again very soon with another video, and until that time, I hope you take care. Bye!